up, y'all? It's your girl, Trisha Shanice, and on this episode of Limelight, we are talking to a licensed master social worker as well as a therapist. His name is Dwayne James, and first of all, let me tell y'all, we go way back. I know Dwayne, I love him, and honestly, I wanted to speak to him because I feel like he's doing big things right now. He's helping the people, he's helping our people especially, so let's get right into it. With no further ado, what's up, Dwayne? Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been seeing what you've been doing, and I'm just so excited that you decided to kind of tap me in to be a part of this project. So thank you so much.
No, first of all, thank you because I've been watching you. You've been watching me, but I've been watching you. And honestly, I feel what you're doing for the community is super dope. You guys, you are helping people, you know, with their mental health. You're helping people know that there's nothing wrong if, you know, you probably suffer from a mental health issue. And I think that's really important, especially because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, the month of May.
Absolutely. So it's like divine timing right now. So absolutely.
You see that this connection was supposed to happen.
Right, you know.
All right, so let's hop right into it. You say that you are a licensed mastered social worker, and then you're a therapist. So what is the difference between the two?
So yeah, that's a good question. So when people say they are therapists, we got to remember that, when people say that they are social workers, you got to remember that social work is a very multifaceted, profession. So to give like a real life example for myself, when I graduated with my master's degree in social work, I already graduated with experience working as a social worker in a drug and rehab facility, as well as in a nursing home facility, right?
But what makes you so passionate about wanting to, you know, help people? I mean, because you could have helped people in different ways. You could have become a doctor, you could be a caregiver, all those things. Why did you kind of focus on social work? Like, do you feel like, I don't know, why?
Yeah. So you want to know what it was. It was a little bit of my experience earlier that I was speaking about in college, where I was recommended by my advisor to speak with the school counselor, the school therapist. And when I went, I saw it was a social worker. And I was just like, I ain't talking to no social, you know what I mean? Like, those are the people that be like, you know, child protective services.
I was thinking that they about to get you. Yeah.
You know, so like that's kind of where my head automatically went. But fortunately, it was a phenomenal Black woman who actually still is one of the school counselors at Adelphi right now. And speaking with her just felt so comfortable. And I began to ask, I'm like, so like, how did you do this? And I began to just ask her questions about like how she got here. And you know, because I was going through a transitional phase as well, where I realized similar, like that, like you said, like I was at Adelphi for nursing. I'm just like, I don't know if this is what I really want to do.
Right.
Like, I don't know if this is what I really want to like pursue. Like, I think I'm doing it for everybody else with myself. So speaking with this person for like almost 2 semesters, I was like, yeah, maybe I want to like maybe explore. So I ended up taking an intro to social welfare, social work and social welfare. And I was like, yo, this is kind of dope.
In the Black community, right?
Yeah.
I feel like women suffer more with mental health issues, or do men? And like, why? Like, which one do you think? Because I feel like when I think about men, I think about just the Black men who you know, who grew up, you know, on the streets, or, you know, drugs, whatever, going to prison. And then for the women, I think of, you know, those women that probably had to do a little more for.
Yeah. You know, I think it's Malcolm X's quote. He said, "The most hated person in America is the Black woman," and I think because of that, I will definitely have to lean more towards Black women needing more support in a sense. But I say that very loosely, you know, because I feel like it's very individualized in a sense. Because when I think about, you know, the Black women that I work for, that I provide services for, I think about the constant conversations around having to be the stronger one, having to be the resilient one, having to be the one that kind of takes the emotional trauma and labor from other folks and their children and their partners and stuff like that. I think about like the sense of Black women not feeling protected, you know, in a sense, and how that plays a role, you know, on their mental wellness. And then on the flip side, when I speak with, you know, Black men, a lot of common themes that come up is the fear to be vulnerable, is the fear to be inadequate, and the pressure that you know that puts on themselves now, for them to feel like, well, like, I'm not making this amount of money, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not being a real man, because of this ideology of toxic masculinity now that pushes them to feel like these are the things that they need to do to be deemed a man, right? So like that added pressure then begins to trigger a lot of depression in a sense. And, you know, there's an uprise right now with Black men experiencing body dysmorphia, right? Where they're feeling like their bodies are not as, you know, are not as adequate, or may not feel like they're up to par with other men and things like that, you know? So like, there are all these, I feel like they're both individualized in a sense. But when I truly do look at, the folks who need the most support, I would say it is our Black women, for sure. It is our Black women.
And another question, because I've heard this before, and I know this is probably kind of going far left, so tell me.
No, we can go here. What's up?
Please tell me to reel it in if I need to. But okay, so when you think of, right, these children who, you know, are growing up and they feel like a different gender, do you feel like that is a mental issue that they're having? Like, I mean, like, is that a mental issue, or do you feel like, how do you explain that, I guess? Because I feel like a lot of people have that question. Like, is it a mental thing, or?
Yeah, that's a real good question. That's a real, and that, it's definitely on par, because I think the way I look at it as being a mental health issue or a mental health concern when it comes to some of our young folks, some of our babies, like having, like, you know, like issues when it comes to coming out, or when it comes to issues of, you know, feeling like they're not the same gender, or they want to be gender non-binary, and all these different things. I think about the mental health component of them not being seen and what that does to their mental health, versus it being like, because they're non-binary, it's a mental health issue, right? So so like for me, again, working in the school, that there's a lot of individuals now that I see, that I speak with, who have, you know, just questions, you know, and a lot of it is not even like they like kick my office door down. It's like, I want to be a girl now. Like, that's not what that's not like I would be working out, but it's just more like, what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be this? It's just like, you can see and you can feel that there's a lot being kind of just like going through their minds. And I think what ends up happening is, you know, when we do not allow them to kind of just speak their minds and to explore that, and we shut it down, and we shun it and say, this is what it's supposed to be, in a sense, that's an additive trauma, right? Because now they're looking at themselves as saying that means that me asking these questions, there's something wrong with me. Gotcha. Right? So like, allowing them to have that platform and just have that space to just unpack and explore, because I've been there, was like a guy's like one of my young folks is like, yeah, like, I don't know, maybe I think I like guys or something. I was just like, okay, like, well, what do you feel? And then like the more we kind of unpack it, like a week or two later, he's like, nah, like, no, that wasn't. And then that's it. But you know what I'm saying? But if I was to be like,
in that space,
yeah, you got to give them the opportunity, because their brains are young. They're still trying to explore it and everything like that. But what I would say though is, like, you know, there are also, you know, young folks and individuals who have the level of awareness and who know, like, something is not right within me. And I think as adults, we have to listen to that.
Understood. And so you say you are working in, you know, undeveloped areas. And if you guys don't know, Dwayne is in New York City right now. He's in Brooklyn.
Yep.
Brooklyn, yeah. No, but so you say that you know, work in these privileged areas. Do you feel there is, and I don't know if there's any studies or research on it, so please tell me if there is, but do you know if there is do you find that there is I don't want to say higher issue, but do you find that there is higher issue when it comes to mental health in the inner cities versus like the rural areas, or maybe it's just because it's more people?
That's a good question. There's a lot of studies, specifically with the National Alliance of Mental Health. We call it NAMI. They do a lot of research around different populations, and what concerns they have regarding mental health. And it's so interesting because when we look at the research, Mental health impacts individuals, whether they be in rural or in urban areas, in different ways, right? So even when we talk about folks through the lens of identity, right? When we're looking at Black and African American individuals, there's still a really, really big gap that needs to be filled when it comes to providing mental health education and access, because there's still a lot of stigma behind mental health within the Black community. But hypothetically, let's say we switch over to white communities, in a sense, though they have access to mental health, and do they have like the resources, sometimes those resources are abused, which is why we see sometimes easier access to mental health drugs and things like that to be hooked on, or other things of that nature, right? So there's a whole separate entity when it comes to the crisis of mental health within each community. When we talk about the Latinx community, and within the Latinx community, sometimes there's a huge increase in depression and anxiety when it comes to first generation individuals who come to America from Latinx communities. And when we talk about our Asian Pacific Islanders, there's a lot of, even in their community, the studies and the research from NAMI shows that there are still a lot of stigmatizations, even sometimes a bit more than in the Black community, within our Asian American Pacific Islander community, that prevents them from seeking mental health services, because they are such a tight-knit community. If it's not within the community, they don't seek it out. So when it comes to just different individuals, different populations, there's something that's very peculiar to their needs, for sure.
Let me ask you this. So you
Absolutely.
brought up in African American in the African American demographic,
Yeah.
there's a stigma, right?
Yeah.
Why
Mm-hmm.
do you think there's a stigma? I mean,
Oh,
like you said, everyone goes through mental issues. It's not a Black or white issue. So why do you think in our community we are so scared if we were to have a mental issue?
yeah, it's so interesting, because that's a question that comes up a lot, and we have to really look at the history of what mental health and how mental health was introduced to Black individuals in America, for us to truly understand why there are all these stigmas and why there are all this hesitation, right? So, and I equate it similar to like what a lot of us are talking about right now in this current dynamic, which is like, the vaccine, and how there's a stark separation of Black identifying folks being like, I'm not trying that thing, whatever. We talk about Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that, right? But in reality, there are similar notations that have happened within the area of mental health within the Black community as well. And then even pushing it further back, when we really understand the history of mental health and therapy and all these kind of things was a very westernized like approach, and is a very much westernized ideology, right? So when we look at these quote unquote founding fathers of therapy and mental health, we're looking at Erik Erikson and all these different people who did a lot of their studies on middle-aged white women. Like that's where a lot of the foundation of mental health comes from, right? And when we bring mental health to America, in a sense, one of the most prevalent, issues that, Black Americans faced was during the civil rights movement, right? Where there was so much cognitive dissonance from white folks and African Americans, where they felt as if these Black people are trying to fight and say that they are equal to us. There's something that's biologically wrong with them. There's something psychologically wrong with them. So what we're going to do is we're going to pump them up with hardcore drugs like Haldol and stuff like that that really kind of just take folks out the game, in a sense. So if this is the disadvantage that we are coming at mental health with, where it was used as a lens, or it was used as something to kind of continue to suppress us, right? I totally understand when it comes to the level of hesitancy, as well as speaking and being vulnerable as a Black person, whether it be a Black man or a Black woman, to white individuals, right? Because mental health, mental health practitioners, mental health clinicians, when we look at the demographics, it's still very heavily white centered, in a sense. It's still a small amount of Black or minority people that are becoming therapists. So the level of comfort to be vulnerable and to share these things, with somebody, we don't know what they're going to do with that information. And that's a real concern, and that's a real fear, especially when we look at the historical context of trying to put trust into other folks that don't kind of see and understand our community.
What do you feel are some things that can be done? Do you think, by us becoming those therapists and kind of, putting ourselves in these positions and then educating our people, do you think that's something that would help maybe to decrease, people having the stigma?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, we have come a long way when it comes to the idea of mental health in Black communities. I think right now we are on the precipice of like, you know, mental health being popularized and being very much on the forefront. Like everyone, Nike's like, we stand with, mental health, the Black mental health, everyone is doing something, right? Which is beautiful. But in the same breath, I think one of the main ways to continue to destigmatize and to truly kind of dismantle the stigmas around mental health within Black communities is to continue to normalize these conversations and to do stuff like what you're doing right now, which is to have these conversations. That's really what it comes down to, right? And representation matters. I think in reality, I think the reason why a lot of Black folks veer away from mental health work or getting degrees in mental health mental health practices is because there's still a stigma that it doesn't pay well, right? And if we are in a Black as us in a Black community, and we are already at a disadvantage of making far less to the dollar of our white counterparts in a sense, why would I want to make the decision to go into a profession that won't pay well, right? But what I would say is because there is such a need for Black practitioners, the money will definitely come. And I think that's something that I continue to kind of preach and to let young folks know that you are like a unicorn in this profession, and no matter where you go, you are at the advantage because there's a need for you, right? So like continuing to build a representation of Black clinicians and Black mental health professions is one way, as well as continuing to like normalize these conversations. We see more things around mental health on TV, around media. So it's kind of in our face way more. So it's not easy to avoid anymore, and just to kind of ignore and say, okay, whatever, that's whatever it is, right? So like these are the things that are happening that are transitioning us into normalizing these conversations.
Gotcha. And so I'm going to ask a little more of an obvious question for those who honestly may not know. So when we speak about mental health, what are some of the things that we're talking about? Exactly. Mm-hmm. Like, what are some of the issues? Because I don't really want to call them problems.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the mental health issues?
Yeah, they range. They range. The thing about mental health. Let me see if I have. Excuse me, I'm like looking through my desk right now.
Oh no.
Yeah. So the thing that we use as our mental health practitioners is what we call the DSM-5, right? And this book here, pretty much breaks down every single mental health diagnoses like known, right? So if it's like a lot of the normal ones, but a lot of the ones that we see in the media or that we notice are very prevalent, right? Are depression, are anxiety, are maybe bipolar, schizophrenia, but there's so much more out there. But working again with a well-educated and a well-trained mental health practitioner, they will be able to really kind of shift through and figure out what is it, if it is anything. Because sometimes, majority of the time, it might just be like you've gone through an experience that you need, some time adjusting to. And adjustment is also like a mental health diagnosis because that takes time. That is an alteration of what your once new normal was going to be. So, it really, really does range.
And without scaring anyone, right? Are there any like telltale signs that some people may have to say, hey, you are suffering from depression or anxiety or anything like that? Are there?
Yeah, of course. The one thing I always tell folks is to be aware, like it's like a community, which is very, very, it's like a very Black approach, right? Because we're all about community most of the time, right? But it's a big community approach. And what I mean by that is like, you need to trust that you have people around you that will be able to call you out and say, you're not operating, or you're not being the person that I know you to be, right? Because naturally what happens is mental health issues manifest differently. It's like a palm print, it's like a snowflake. Everyone is very individualized, right? So for myself, if I feel like I'm gonna enter a depressive episode, I begin to realize that I'm not cleaning up my apartment as much as I usually do. Damn, my laundry's packed is like kind of piling up. I'm not responding to a lot of emails. You know, like something is off.
Let me ask you this. Do you go to a hospital first and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling? And then usually your primary care doctor will then recommend a therapist for you?
Yeah, that's one of many approaches. That's one of many approaches. You can definitely take that approach of going to your primary care physician and saying, you know, like, I may want to, you know, speak with a therapist. I think that's a good way for it to stay within your insurance, for it to be a little bit cheaper for you, because, you know, you got to do is pay copay, right? And then based on, of course, like insurance and availability, they'll be able to connect you with someone.
Do you recommend, you know, Black people, people of color, whatever, do you recommend us go and seek, you know, people who look like us? And I would presume your answer is yes.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I would recommend, okay, so I've had to, with like full moment of transparency and vulnerability, I've had to begin to check myself on that, because I do realize that sometimes in reality, for some Black individuals, the person that may have perpetuated the most trauma to themselves are Black people themselves, you know? So we have to be mindful, you know, that it's just like, oh, you black, no, you got to get a Black therapist. But sometimes there are going to be individuals that will say, you know what, like, I want a non-biased opinion. And sometimes they might feel like that non-biased opinion might be from an Asian woman or a white man or whatever it is. Because that, you know, when we talk about identity, we talk about intersectionalities of identity, right? You know, with me, I'm not just a Black man, but I'm a Black Jamaican man, or a Black man from Boston. I'm all these different things that play a role in what people will see from me. So if I know that I've had issues, hypothetically, I've had issues, you know, growing up and having conflict with Black men, I would not recommend like go and see a Black man for therapy, because then chances are a lot of those things are going to come up, right? So it's about who you see and who you feel the most fit.
And so can you talk a little bit, because you mentioned trauma. Can
Yeah.
you speak about that, please? Because I feel like I'm at a point in my life sometimes where, you know, things are going well, but sometimes I do think about like things that happened to me when I was younger. And it's weird because like I feel like, well, you know, like I don't think about that. I suppressed it a little bit, so it doesn't play a role. But then I'll realize some of the things that I do, and I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
maybe. Do you think it's because I did not revisit those things from my past and work them out so they come up in my future? Or do you think it's just because, well, it happened to you, so you're going to think about it?
You know, what I would say without like, you know, transitioning into like a whole therapy session is you said one or two things that stuck out to me, which is one is the word suppress, right? And the idea is of with suppression is when we kind of push those things down, that does not mean that it was resolved, right? That means it's kind of like I put it in the fridge to deal with later. I season the chicken and I put it in the fridge or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we're not doing anything with it right now, right? So what happens is when we continue to suppress things, because trauma compounds, it builds on top of one another, right? So if something traumatic has happened to you in your childhood and you're just like, damn, that was messed up, but you know, like I got to keep going, which is naturally what a lot of Black women and sometimes Black men deal with, which is like I can't deal with it, because if I deal with it, I'm going to slow down and it's going to knock me off my game. So I just got to put that down real quick and just keep it moving, right? But what we are doing is that when we suppress it, again, we're not dealing with it and we're not addressing it. We suppress and not address is what I tell like my clients. And what happens is that begins to manifest and come out in different ways, because it's like energy, right? The energy comes out in one way or another. The same thing that I tell with Black men who, you know, we have these conversations all the time about vulnerability with Black men and things like that, and Black men specifically when it comes to crying. You know what I'm saying? When a Black man wants to cry and they do not cry, that's a suppression of emotions and feelings. But what ends up happening, that gets suppressed and it compounds, and then what happens one day, they just blow up on the smallest thing. Somebody sneezed and then they didn't say bless you to them, so now they blowing up, right? That's a manifestation of all these things that have been suppressed for so long. And when in addition to that idea of unaddressed trauma, we also have to look on the opposite side of the coin, which is a lot of individuals, you know, specifically Black folks, are very resilient. And I hate using the word resilient sometimes, because I think it's such a cop-out for us to hold other folks accountable for the things that have been done to us, right? Oh, they're resilient, they'll get over it. Like, you know what I mean? But in reality, sometimes that's what it is, where folks will be able to bounce back and utilize whatever traumatic experience or event has happened to propel them forward, in a sense, right?
is that normal? I mean, because like you're right, I feel like you said, I have so much going on. I'm not thinking about it. I don't have no time. Like, because I don't feel like we should normalize things that should not be normalized. So if you have trauma from back then and you should, like you said, address it, I feel like that should be done. So like,
Absolutely.
should I do that? Like, should I
be telling people, listen, I'm and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I tell people all the time, one of the best decisions that I made was going to therapy while I was in college, because I did not realize, like we were talking about, a lot of the stuff that I was suppressing from childhood to adolescence to like my first couple years in college. I was just like, this is the way of life. You just got to keep moving forward. And I was not realizing that it had such an adverse impact on how I perceived myself, how I perceived the world, how I felt like people perceived me, in a sense. So I had to I nearly had like a nervous breakdown, in a sense, when I was in college. And I had my advisor who recommended, you should go like speak with a therapist or speak with the campus like therapist. I was like,
so all right, so let me ask you real quick. Did you go to the campus therapist or did you go off campus?
No, I went to the campus therapist because at that point in time, I was just like, I can't afford to go somewhere else. It's free. So, but for me, I went there very, very guarded.
Yeah.
In a sense, I wasn't going to say anything bad about my family. I wasn't going to say anything bad because I didn't want it to come back to them. Like, that's the perception and the idea that I came in with, right? Because again, we are conditioned to know that if we talk about what happens outside of the family, that puts the family at risk.
When you said that you had went to your school therapist, I found that funny because at one stint, I'm not gonna front, I tried to go to my school therapist and I went for a while, I was going consistently, but I felt like I was just talking, like she wasn't saying, she was like, yeah, okay, like, so, and so I'm like, how is this supposed to go? Like, is she supposed to give me feedback?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to just talk to her. And I felt like you. I didn't want to say anything that I felt was going to make my family look bad. And you know what I mean? Like, so I was very, like you, guarded at one point. But then I also felt like was this helping? Because I was talking about it, but I didn't know if it was helping because I was still feeling certain ways. So maybe she just wasn't.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that's something that I always address when I do meet with new individuals, because it's real, and we have to again have that cultural awareness to know that if I am meeting with a Black person and I ask them, have you ever had, when I'm doing my assessment and I say, have you ever had a therapist before? And they say no, I put that pen down and I'm like, all right. Like, let's be real right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you thinking about right now? What's going through your mind? Because I remember my first time there, I didn't want to say anything, and we have that honest conversation to let them know, like, 99.9 of everything that you say is going to stay within this realm. The only time that I have to say something is if you say you about to go like hurt somebody or you want to hurt yourself. Everything else outside of that is confidential by law. I can lose my license and you can sue me if you find out that I've been talking your business outside, anywhere else, right? So like, I think the issue again is a lot of folks don't understand and have the education of what therapy entails, right? Because for me, like what it sounds like when you're talking about your experience is that that individual was trying to build the basis of relationship and not kind of jump in too early, right? That's what it sounded like when it came to this talking and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, what I have to do is I have to let folks know, like, this is the part of the session. The first couple of sessions is going to be this, just so you know, right? And then we're going to get into like some stuff later on, and then we kind of build that therapeutic relationship in a sense, because it's like riding a bike in a sense. You have to train them to let them understand what it is. But then also again, every approach is different.
Really quickly, I know we're running out of time, but really quickly. So right now you are, you're working as a therapist and you're a therapist for children, adults, and couples.
Yeah.
Okay. How are we balancing all of that? Because I mean, you're going from like, what is the ages of the children, first of all, that you're working with?
Yeah. The youngest child I have now is a young man. He is 11. He's 12. Just turned 12 actually. Yeah, he's 12 years old. And the oldest client I have right now is 58. Right now. Yeah.
So, I mean, even for you, how is your brain clicking on and off? Like 11-year-old, 58, like I'm in between.
Yeah.
Like, how are you balancing everything? How does that?
A lot of self-care, right? Like really, really taking care of myself because when I really, really do look at this profession and I really look at what I'm able to do as a blessing. And the one thing that I would hate to do is, you know, these individuals have come and trusted themselves with me to be their most vulnerable selves and tell me their most deepest, darkest, traumas and secrets. And the last thing I would want to do is make them feel as if I'm not paying attention or I'm not listening or I'm like disengaged. So I really have to on the back end take care of myself, whether that be eating, right? Which I always could do a bit better at. Sleeping a lot, sleeping and doing all these things to make sure that I am my best self. So when I am in front of that computer screen,
Right.
they know that I'm ready for them and what they have going on, right?
Understood. I think one of the reasons why I asked that question is because, just even in this profession and being a reporter, sometimes it's like, we tell so many different stories every single day. We never know what story we're going to get. Sometimes, it is a happy, cool story, whatever. And then sometimes it is about a death.
Yep.
And so we're always having to switch our gears to and our emotions at like a drop of a dime.
Yes.
And sometimes it's really taxing for us. So I can imagine for you, because what I can say, y'all, like I said, me and Dwayne go way back.
Oh, it's so true.
I used to come to him and tell him a whole lot of stuff. Okay. And I feel like
a therapist in training back then.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, you were. So, but what I'm saying is like, as an adult, and I'm looking back, I'm like, sometimes I feel like you were an empath because I feel like I would tell you things and you took it and you felt it. So it's like, when I found out that you wanted to be a therapist, I was like, oh my gosh, I was scared for you because I'm like, how's he about to do all this?
Yeah.
It was, you know what I mean? So, oh my gosh, like, how do you not take everybody's like stuff, baggage with you home?
Well, one, as a therapist, we all have to have supervision, which is what we do to unpack all of that, right? So once a week, I meet with someone. Fortunately, the individual that I meet with is the CEO and the owner of the company that I work for. I work as a contracted agent for them, and they kind of supply the clients and stuff like that. But I meet with her once a week, and we're able to have like a 1 hour, like somewhat therapy session. We call it supervision. Where, we speak about like what was the hardest thing this week. What was the thing that you kind of continuously thought about, after the week was over? Like, talk to us about it. Talk to me about it. What have you been doing for yourself? How have you been eating? Things like that. And in reality, it's having your own therapist too, which I do have. To really
just to make this clear to your clients, you still do not tell none of their business.
Oh, no. Well, I don't tell any of their business. I keep a lot of that like kind of under wraps, but what I will do is in supervision, it's kind of just talking about what was the therapeutic discourse like? What approach did you use? Did you use CBT? Did you use that? Like, it's kind of that conversation that we have to kind of unpack that.
As we were saying, it is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yep.
So with that being said, what are some things people should do to make sure that they have a healthy mental health and that they're just taking care of themselves and their bodies?
Yes. My top 3 is you are what you eat.
Ooh.
You are what you eat.
Ooh.
Sleep is paramount. And for me, it's also trying to get outside at least for 20 minutes a day. And lastly, always unclench your jaw, because naturally for Black folks, we hold a lot of tension in our jaws when we talk and everything.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Look at me, I'm all like, wait, unclench your jaw. I mean, how do you know if you're clenched?
You'll feel it. If somebody says unclench your jaw and you notice that you just begin to relax your jaw, because we hold the tension in there. We hold it.
I didn't know that. So we should crack a smile more often.
Yeah,
huh?
Amen. Right.
Perfect. And so for anybody who's like interested in becoming either a therapist, a social worker,
yes,
what are the steps? So obviously, you did college for your 4-year.
Yeah.
Did you have to get your master's?
Yeah. So you could take multiple approaches to become a social worker. So for me, the route that I decided to take was to get my bachelor's in social work. And there's a very limited pool or a limited amount of colleges in the US that have bachelor's in social work programs. But usually what that allows you to do is if you get your bachelor's in social work, your senior year of your BSW program, Bachelor in Social Work program, is technically going to be your first year of your master's program. So what ends up happening is when you finish your bachelor's, it will only take you 1 year to get your master's in social work because you've already done your first year as a senior.
Okay. And so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
You are also going to be pursuing your PhD.
Yes.
Howard University or whatever. So yeah, I see you out there.
Yes.
And congratulations, first of all. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, sis.
I'm so proud. Like that's my birthday. I'm so proud. But yeah, so you're gonna be going there for your PhD. Do you have to get your PhD, or are you just being an overachiever?
No. So I'll be very honest with you. It's a little bit of both. I knew
it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie about that. Like for me, I would say that the pandemic truly influenced that decision for me to apply for PhD programs because I began to realize, you know, for a lot of people, they had a lot of time to be introspective, and for some individuals, it was beneficial. For others, it was a very scary experience. And for me, it was a little bit of both, where I'm just like, you have a lot of time on your hands right now. You don't got to do the hustle and bustle back and forth from the school to home and all that, in that commuting and all that kind of stuff. That just all stopped, right? And I had a lot of time to just think about what is it that you want. You've been doing everything else for everybody else. Like, what is it that you want to do? You know? And I was like, you know, and I think I was always inspired by a lot of the Black social workers around me who had PhDs and stuff like that. And I always felt like that was like so cool. And I was like, you know what? I was like, maybe let me just give it a shot. And like, I applied to 4 programs, and I got into 3 out of the 4 of them. And I decided to take Howard's offer. So I'll be starting Howard in the fall.
If you're open to it, if anybody would like to reach out to you, do you have any contact that they should?
Yeah, they can go to my website, www.dwaynejames.com. It's like a one-stop shop where you can see everything that I'm doing, and there's like a space where you can like email me or whatever it is. My email address is always also attached to that website. If they want, they can check out my Instagram, Wayne's_ambition. You can contact me there as well. But then in addition to that, for folks looking for support when it comes to mental health support, there's so many you know, new resources coming out. So a major one that I'm a huge advocate for and I love is Therapy for Black Girls, which is a website, and it's literally a one-stop shop. You can put in your zip code and it'll give you all of the registered Black, you know, therapists within that area for you to check out and contact. I would definitely recommend it. There's also one for men. I think it's Therapy for Black Men.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Last question, because I have to do it from my own mind.
Yes, bring it.
Sometimes I feel like I could be a conspiracy theorist. I'm just real with you. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I do too much research over here.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the mind.
Yes.
You believe in MK Ultra?
MK Ultra? I'm not even familiar with what MK Ultra is. You gotta, no, what's
come on, brother? You have to be.
MK Ultra? No, what's that?
Yeah, it's like they do like mind control type.
Really?
So like back in the day, okay, so like MK, from what my understanding, like back in the day, they was doing like these experiments and stuff like that, and that's basically what it was. It was like they were like hypnotizing people, like brainwashing people, like all this type of stuff, just making them feel all types of ways.
Yeah.
Hey, you believe in that? Like, cause
I mean, so what I would say is that when it comes to, I believe in influence for sure, right? Like when I think of like, you know, mind control in a sense, I look at it through the lens of influence, and the way I look at it is like, for example, when we look at like the insurrection that happened on January 6th, right? That was through all influence, right? This was thousands of people who thought that the government was going to be overthrown, so they had to fight for their country and take over the Capitol building. Yeah. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, and so I look at it through that lens, where it's just like to look at all these people to have the same ideology, and we're on the outside like, how the hell, you know, how? But
influence is doing the mind control.
But I can definitely agree that there's some correlations in a sense, and I would also say that there are the same correlations when it comes to liberal media too, MSNBC and all these kind of things. You have to be very, very mindful about what information you are taking in a sense, and not doing your own research, right?
All right, what about hypnosis? You believe in that?
I do to a certain extent, because I do know that there are some therapists who utilize frameworks of hypnosis in a sense in their therapy. It's technically considered a therapeutic approach and practice. It's a lot of training that has to go into it.
Like, you really messing with my mind for real, for real.
Yeah, but it's, I don't know. I would say I don't see that happening even within the therapy community, or even within like therapeutic approaches, like a lot. Like I went to like one conference where somebody said they specialized in that, and they spoke about the results of, like, you know, people who experience loss or trauma and how they are able to move forward and all this stuff. But like, I mean, for some folks, like I said, there's some individuals who truly believe in the idea of hypnosis and believe in the idea of all these things, and that might actually work for them. That approach might work for them, you know? So it's like, if you like it, I love it. Like, I'm not gonna shun you, you know, to say like, nah, that ain't working. If you feel like it's worked for you and it is giving you and it's allowing you to have a better quality of life, then I'm all for it. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, well, I feel like I got all of the questions that I needed to get out. I'm sorry, you know, we could talk forever.
I know.
So thank you so much for taking time to speak to me today. I really, really appreciate you.
Yes, anytime, for real. If you want me to come back, do a part 2, do whatever, let me know what's up. I'm down.
Don't tell me that, because I'll pin you in right now.
I'm so down. Let me know what's up. Like I said, I love supporting. I love what you're doing. I think it's so important. I think there's, again, similar to, like, you know, therapists and mental health clinicians, there's such a need for more Black women or Black folks in general in media and journalism to tell our stories the way they should be told. So thank you, for real.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I appreciate that. Okay, you guys know where to find me on JSWTV. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and do everything that you do on YouTube videos on this video. And until next time, we are out, people.